The rain had been falling since morning. It wasn't the heavy kind that drowns the world in noise, just a soft, endless drizzle that crept into the bones, cold and lingering. I stood by the window, watching it slide down the glass. I'd texted Day One 3 times since last night. He hadn't replied. I told myself he was busy again, that his new project was taking all his attention, but the ache in my chest said otherwise. Behind me, I heard Jisoo's voice. "Calm, a little rough from sleep. You're doing it again." I turned. He was sitting on the couch, hair messy, a half-empty mug in his hand. "Doing what?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Waiting for someone who already forgot what time looks like." I frowned. He's not ignoring me. He's just tired. Jisoo set his mug down with a quiet clink. "You always say that, Heir." I didn't want to argue, but something sharp crawled up my throat. "You don't know him like I do." "No," he said softly. "But I know you." That silenced me. The rain filled the space between us. Jisoo looked at me for a long time. That same look he always gave when he was holding something back. Then he sighed and stood up. "If you're going to wait again, at least eat something first." He walked to his room, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain and the hollow weight in my chest. By the time I reached the cafe, I was soaked. My umbrella had given up halfway there, and my jacket clung to my shoulders like a second skin. Day One was already there, sitting by the window, his perfect reflection framed in the glass. Pressed shirt, clean watch, not a single hair out of place. He looked up when I arrived, but there was no smile. "You're late." There was traffic." He scrolled through his phone. "There's always traffic." I wanted to tell him that I'd run through the rain just to see him, that my hands were still shaking from the cold, that my chest had been burning with the need to be near him. But the words stayed stuck somewhere between my heart and throat. "You look tired," I said instead. "Have you been sleeping?" He finally looked at me, and for a second, the sharpness in his face softened. "You worry too much." "Someone has to," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. And when he left a few minutes later, answering a call without so much as a goodbye, I stayed behind staring at his untouched coffee. When I got back to the apartment, Jisoo was sitting on the couch again, the TV on but muted. "You went out," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, hanging up my jacket. "He's just stressed. He's got so much going on at work." "Did he even look happy to see you?" I froze. "That's not fair." "It's not." His tone wasn't cruel, just tired. "You keep defending someone who keeps making you feel small." "Jisoo." He looked up at me then, his gaze sharp but sad. "One day, Heir, you're going to realize that not everyone who says they love you actually means it." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't. I just turned away. As I walked to my room, I heard him whisper, "And when that day comes, I'll still be here." 3 weeks later, the accident happened. Day One had called me that night, his voice tight, words slurred with frustration. He wanted to talk. I shouldn't have gone, I knew that. The storm was bad, the roads slick. But when he said please, I went anyway. He was waiting in his car outside the office building, headlights cutting through the rain. I got in, my heart pounding. He didn't look at me at first. Just gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned white. "You've been talking to Jisoo again," he said. I hesitated. "He's my friend. He's jealous." "He's not. Don't defend him." His voice rose, hard and sharp. "He's always hovering around you, acting like I'm the bad guy." I swallowed, trying to stay calm. "He just cares. You don't have to. Don't tell me what I have to do." The car swerved slightly. My hand shot out to steady the dashboard. "Day One, watch the road." But before I could finish, there was a flash of light. Tires screeched. The sound of glass shattering swallowed everything. Then silence. When I woke up in the hospital, my head ached and my chest felt like it was caving in. The first thing I saw was Jisoo, sitting by my bed, his eyes red and tired. "You're awake," he whispered, like he was afraid I'd break if he spoke louder. "Day One," I croaked. "Where is he?" Jisoo looked away. The silence was answer enough. "He's alive," he said finally. "But he's not waking up." My breath caught. My vision blurred. "I should have stopped him," I whispered. "I should have. You didn't do anything wrong." But the guilt already had its claws in me. And when people began to whisper that I was the reason for the crash, that I distracted him, that I caused it, I didn't deny it. Because maybe they were right. And so I stayed. Day after day, I sat beside Day One's hospital bed, holding his hand, waiting for him to open his eyes. I told myself he would wake up. That love was enough. And every night, when my strength ran out, Jisoo was there, bringing food, making sure I slept, quietly holding me when I couldn't stop shaking. I didn't know then that the person keeping me alive wasn't the one lying unconscious in that hospital bed. It was the one waiting for me to finally see him. The smell of antiseptic no longer made me dizzy. It was strange how quickly a hospital could begin to feel like home once you stopped expecting to leave. 3 years. That's how long the monitors beside Daewon's bed had been keeping rhythm for both of us. Each morning began the same way. I'd wipe the condensation off the window, change the flowers, smooth the creases from his blanket. The nurses used to offer to help, but after a while they let me do it. It was the only part of the day that still felt like control. I spoke to him about everything. The weather, the small arguments Jisoo and I had about groceries, the dreams I kept forgetting the moment I woke. Sometimes I read aloud from the old novel he'd once said he liked. I'd stopped believing he could hear me, but I couldn't stop talking either. Silence made the walls breathe too loud. Jisoo always came in quietly. He'd drop a coffee on the table, lean against the doorway, and watch until I noticed him. "Morning," I'd whisper. He'd smile, the same tired, patient curve of lips that had carried me through the worst nights. "You should eat something before visiting hour's end." He said that every day. I always promised I would. Most days I didn't. I sometimes caught my reflection in the window, pale, thinner, eyes that had learned to hide their own hope. Jisoo noticed before I did. One evening, after the nurse dimmed the lights, he pulled a chair beside me. "Haran," he said, softly but firmly. "You need to take a break." "I can't." "You can," he insisted. "He's not going anywhere." "That's exactly why I can't." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "It's been 3 years." I looked at Daewon's still face, the faint rise and fall of his chest. 3 years isn't enough. For what? To make up for it. There it was. The guilt that still pressed against my ribs like a secret bruise. The accident. The voices that blamed me. The whisper in my own head that agreed with them. Jisoo didn't argue. He rarely did anymore. Instead, he reached across the small space and adjusted the blanket on my lap, the way he used to when I got sick during exams. His fingers brushed mine for only a second, but warmth lingered long after. Back at the apartment, the walls were quieter than I remembered. Dust had gathered on the bookshelves. My old paintings leaned against the corner, unfinished. Jisoo cooked while I sat at the table, half watching the steam rise from the pot. The sound of the knife against the cutting board was steady, almost comforting. "You still live like you're waiting for him to knock on the door," he said suddenly. I flinched. "I just don't know how to stop." He stirred the soup without looking at me. "You don't have to stop loving him," he murmured. "Just stop disappearing for him." The words sank deep. I didn't know how to answer, so I said nothing. But that night, as I lay awake, I realized I couldn't remember the last time anyone had spoken to me like that. Not gentle, not cruel, just honest. The seasons kept folding over each other. Spring again. Cherry blossoms outside the hospital, petals sticking to my shoes as I walked in. Inside, everything stayed the same. The beeping, the faint hum of the air conditioner, Daewon's heartbeat measured in steady lines. Sometimes, when exhaustion pulled my head down onto the bed rail, I dreamt he was awake. He'd smile at me the way he used to, warm and sure. But then the dream would twist, his eyes would turn distant, and he'd call me by another name. I always woke before I heard it clearly. One rainy afternoon, I found Jisoo sitting in the hospital cafe, a pile of papers in front of him. He was working, always working, yet he looked up the moment he sensed me. "You're soaked," he said, pushing a napkin toward me. I smiled faintly. Some habits never change. He shook his head. "Neither does the rain." We sat together in easy silence for a while. Then he said, "When are you going to start painting again?" I blinked. "I don't know if I can." "Then maybe you should try anyway." His tone was simple, but his eyes held something steady. Belief, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. For the first time in years, I felt a small, fragile spark inside my chest. I didn't know if it was hope or guilt, but it was something alive. That night, after visiting hours ended, I lingered by Daewon's bed. The lights outside flickered from a passing storm. I talked to him as usual, about Jisoo's new project, about how I'd finally agreed to join him for coffee, somewhere that wasn't the hospital. "I still believe you'll wake up," I whispered. "But if you don't, I hope you know I tried." My voice cracked. I wiped my eyes quickly, afraid the nurse would see. When I turned to leave, Jisoo was standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak, just offered me a quiet nod. The kind that said I'm proud of you without using words. A week later, I brought my sketchbook to the hospital. The lines came out stiff at first, my fingers unsure after so long. But as the hours passed, the page began to fill. The outline of a window, a silhouette seated beside a bed. Look, Day One, I murmured. You used to tease me about drawing too slow. The beeping of the monitor answered in rhythm. Jisoo says I should try to live again, I continued. I think he's right. You'd like him more now. He laughs more when I'm around. I didn't notice the nurse enter until she gasped softly. He moved. My pencil froze. What? She stepped closer, eyes wide. His fingers. I stared at Daewon's hand. For a second, nothing happened. Then, faintly, the slightest twitch. Daewon. My voice trembled. Daewon, can you hear me? The nurse ran to call the doctor. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. The door burst open, footsteps, hurried voices. I stayed where I was, gripping his hand. Hey, I whispered, tears blurring the edges of his face. It's me. It's Heir. You're okay. A small sound escaped his throat, rough, broken, but real. His eyelids fluttered. I leaned closer, desperate, terrified, hopeful all at once. His lips parted. The single word that slipped out was quiet, almost breathless. Noah. The room spun. My hand slipped from his as the doctors crowded around. The name echoed in my head, louder than the machines, louder than my heartbeat. Noah. Not Heir. The rain started again outside the window, soft and endless. And for the first time in 3 years, I realized I was the only one still dreaming. I didn't know how long I stood there. The moment stretched until the edges of reality felt thin. I must have moved, because the next thing I knew, a nurse was guiding me away from the bed. Sir, please wait outside, she said gently. I nodded numbly, my throat too tight to speak. My feet moved on their own, out of the room, down the corridor. The hallway lights were too bright. The world felt unreal. Jisoo was there, sitting on one of the benches, his head tilted back, eyes closed. When he saw me, he shot to his feet instantly. What happened? He asked. My voice cracked. He woke up. Jisoo blinked, his eyes widening in disbelief. He did. I nodded once. He said a name. What name? Noah. The word fell between us like broken glass. I swallowed hard. He called me Noah. The silence that followed was sharp. Jisoo blinked slowly, trying to process it. Noah, he repeated, his voice quiet but tense. You mean? Yeah. I cut him off, laughing bitterly. His first love. I sank down onto the bench, pressing my palms to my eyes. 3 years, Jisoo. I stayed 3 years. I read to him, talked to him, prayed for him. And the first thing he says when he wakes up. My voice cracked. It wasn't my name. Jisoo's hand hovered near my shoulder for a moment before resting there gently. His voice was low. You don't deserve that, Heir. I know, I whispered. But it still hurts. He exhaled slowly, sitting beside me. He's confused. People wake up from comas, and don't know what year it is. He might not even remember. No, I said, shaking my head. He remembers perfectly. Just not me. Jisoo didn't argue. He didn't need to. We both knew the truth had been there long before the accident. When the doctors finally let me in again, Daewon was sitting up in bed, pale but awake. His parents were beside him, their relief spilling over in soft tears. When his gaze landed on me, he smiled faintly. You came. My throat tightened. Of course. His mother touched his shoulder. We'll give you two a moment, she said kindly, and left the room. Daewon looked back at me, his brow furrowing slightly. You look different. 3 years can do that, I said, forcing a small laugh. 3 years. He blinked, confusion shadowing his features. You've been asleep, I murmured. For a long time. He was silent for a while, his eyes studying me as if searching for something that wasn't there. Then he said it again, softly, tenderly, like the name itself was a comfort. Noah. My heart sank. Daewon, I whispered, my voice trembling. It's me. Heir. He blinked, confusion flickering again. Heir. Yes, I said, a smile breaking under the weight of tears. I was with you. Every day. I stayed. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but what came out instead was a quiet, hesitant, oh. Just oh. Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. The silence that followed stretched, thin and cruel. He looked away first. I'm sorry, he said softly. My mind's messy right now. I know, I whispered, though the words tasted like ash. I don't remember leaving. One moment I was standing beside him, and the next, I was outside in the rain, the hospital lights blurring through the water on my lashes. I didn't realize I was crying until Jasur was there, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me close. He called for him again. I choked out. He said Noah like it meant everything. Jasur didn't say anything. He just held me tighter. For a long time, neither of us moved. The storm outside roared, but inside his arms, the world went quiet. When I finally spoke, my voice was raw. I thought love meant staying. It does, Jasur murmured against my hair. But not when the person you're staying for keeps looking past you. I broke then, completely. The tears came hard and fast, and Jasur held me through all of it. He didn't tell me to stop. He didn't tell me to be strong. He just stayed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the city lights flickering outside the apartment window. My phone buzzed again and again, messages from the hospital, updates about Daewon's condition, even a text from his mother thanking me for everything I'd done. None of them said he remembers you. Jasur knocked once before stepping in, a blanket draped over his arm and a thermos in his hand. You didn't eat. I'm not hungry. He sighed, setting the food down anyway. You'll get sick. I stared at the window. I'm already sick, Jasur. He was quiet for a moment, then sat beside me. You're not sick. You're hurt. There's a difference. His voice was so gentle it undid me completely. My shoulders shook, and I turned toward him without thinking, burying my face against his shoulder. He froze for a heartbeat, then wrapped his arms around me. His warmth seeped into the cold I'd been carrying for years. For the first time since the accident, I didn't feel completely alone. The next morning, I went back to the hospital one last time. To see him and get over it all the guilty. Daewon was awake, surrounded by flowers and light. His mother turned when she saw me, smiling faintly. Heir, she said kindly. He told us how much you did for him. Thank you. I nodded. I'm just glad he's okay. When Daewon's gaze met mine, something flickered in his eyes. Not love. Not even recognition. Just distant kindness. The kind you give to a stranger who once helped you. Heir, he said softly. I don't remember everything, but thank you for being there. The words were gentle, but they broke something in me anyway. I smiled, though my chest ached so badly it hurt to breathe. Get better soon, Daewon. And then I walked out before he could say no again. Outside, Jasur was waiting near the hospital steps, holding 2 cups of coffee. He looked up when he saw me. Ready? I stared back at the tall grey building behind me, the place that had held 3 years of my heart. Yeah, I whispered finally. I'm ready. He smiled, quiet and relieved, and handed me the warm cup. As we walked away, the rain began to fall again, soft and familiar. For once, it didn't feel cruel. It felt like an ending. And maybe, the beginning of something else. The rain didn't stop that night. It followed me like a curse, soft at first, then heavier, until my clothes clung to my skin, and the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and grey. For 3 years, I'd walked the same path every day, from the hospital to our small apartment, my hands carrying food, medicine, and hope. Now, I carried nothing. Daewon had woken up, and yet somehow, I was the one who'd stopped breathing. When I finally reached the apartment, Jasur was there, sitting cross-legged on the couch, a blanket draped over his shoulders, and a cup of instant ramen in his hand. He looked up the moment the door creaked open, and his eyes softened like he already knew. You didn't stay, he said quietly. I shook my head. He didn't need me anymore. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. He just stood up across the room and handed me a towel. His fingers brushed my cheek. Light, careful, steady. Then come home, he murmured. And for the first time in 3 years, I realized I didn't have one. Days blurred together after that. I tried to return to work, but it was impossible to focus. People whispered. Some pitied me. Some didn't even know what I'd done, only that I was the boy who stayed beside the comatose heir of the Daemyoung group. The tabloids loved that story. The loyal stand-in. The fool in love. Every time I saw Daewon's name in the news. Daemyoung heir miraculously recovers after 3 years in coma. My chest twisted. I told myself I was happy for him, that he deserved to live freely, that this ache was proof that I had loved him right. But every night, when I lay on the couch beside Jasur's sleeping form, I couldn't shake the question. If love was supposed to be selfless, why did it hurt like punishment? One morning, everything shattered again. I was walking back from the market when a black car stopped beside me. The tinted window rolled down, and I froze. Mrs. Seo, Daewon's mother, sat inside. Immaculate, cold, her diamond earrings catching the sunlight like shards of ice. "Heron," she said smoothly. "Get in." Every instinct screamed no, but politeness and fear made me obey. Inside, the air smelled of expensive perfume and something sharper: control. She smiled, thin and rehearsed. "I heard you've been keeping your distance. That's quite ungrateful, considering everything our family did for you." I swallowed. I didn't want to disturb Daewon's recovery. Disturb? Her tone sharpened. "You're the reason he survived, Heron. He woke up because of you. The least you can do is stay by his side until he's stable." Her words were a command wrapped in concern. I knew that tone. I'd heard it when she first allowed me to stay after the accident. Not because she cared, but because it was convenient. "With respect, ma'am," I said quietly. "He doesn't need me anymore." Her eyes flashed. "Don't make this difficult. If you truly loved my son, you wouldn't abandon him now." Abandon. The word hit like a slap. She leaned closer. "You know what loyalty means in this family, Heron. I can make sure you never work again. Or I can make sure your rent disappears and your bills pile up. You wouldn't want that, would you?" I gripped my bag tighter. "You're threatening me?" She smiled again, calm, cruel, perfect. "I'm offering you a chance to stay useful." That was when I saw movement outside the car. Jisoo, standing by the curb, his expression unreadable. "Get out," he said flatly. The door opened before I could speak. Jisoo reached in, grabbed my wrist, and pulled me away. The car door slammed, and Mrs. Seo's glare followed us down the street. When we turned the corner, he finally let go, breathing hard. "What did she say?" "Nothing that matters," I whispered. He turned to me, jaw tight. "Don't lie to me." I tried to smile. "She just wants me to take care of Daewon again." "And you're going to do it?" "No." The word came out smaller than I wanted, but it was enough to make him exhale, shoulders sinking. "Good," he muttered. "Because if she ever tries that again—" "Jisoo," I interrupted, "don't. You can't protect me from people like her." He looked at me then, really looked, with that strange fire in his eyes I'd never understood. "Watch me." That night, silence filled our small apartment. The kind that hums under your skin. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to read the eviction notice that had arrived that afternoon. My hands shook too much to focus. Jisoo came out of his room, hair messy, wearing an oversized hoodie. "You're still up," he murmured. "They raised the rent again," I said, pushing the paper toward him. "We can't stay here much longer." He leaned against the counter, studying me. "What if I had a way to fix that?" I laughed dryly. "Unless you found a gold mine under our floorboards, no." He didn't smile. "I'm serious." I looked up. "What are you talking about?" He hesitated, then said softly, "Marry me." The spoon in my hand clattered onto the table. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, calmer this time. "If you do, they can't touch you. Legally, emotionally, socially, they'll back off." I blinked at him, caught between disbelief and exhaustion. "Jisoo, we barely survive on our good days. You're broke half the time. How exactly are you going to protect me from the Daemyoung family?" He stared at me, and then he smiled, slow, secret, and heartbreakingly real. "Because I'm not broke, Heron." I frowned. "What?" He sighed and walked toward the window. The city lights washed over his face, gold and pale, like something out of reach. "My full name isn't just Jisoo Park," he said quietly. "It's Jisoo Kong Park." The name hit me like thunder. Kong as in the Kong Empire, the silent powerhouse behind half the country's economy. The family that never appeared in tabloids, never flaunted their wealth, but owned everything from hotels to conglomerates. "You're joking," I whispered. He turned around, eyes steady. "I wish I was." My throat felt tight. You never said." "I didn't want to," he said simply. "I just wanted to be your friend. Not a name. Not a title. Just me." I sat there in stunned silence. All those times he'd quietly covered my share of the bills, the mysterious part-time jobs that never lasted, the phone calls he took outside. It all made sense now. He wasn't ordinary. He never had been. He'd just chosen to live like he was. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked finally. "Because you're being hunted," he said. "And I'm done watching you get cornered." His voice trembled, but not with fear, with resolve. "If marrying me keeps them from touching you, then so be it. I'll make it legal. I'll make it loud. I'll make it untouchable." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Jisoo, this is insane." "Maybe," he said softly. "But so is loving someone who keeps getting hurt for trying to be good." He took a step closer, his voice barely a whisper. "Let me protect you for once, Heron." Something in my chest cracked. I wanted to argue, to laugh it off, to tell him that marrying him would only make things worse. But when I looked at him, this man who'd stood beside me through every storm, who'd watched me break without ever asking for anything, I couldn't find the strength. I just stood there, shaking, while he reached out and brushed the tear I didn't know had fallen. "Sleep," he murmured. "We'll talk tomorrow." He turned to leave, but before he could, I caught his sleeve. "Jisoo," I whispered. "Why me?" He looked back, eyes soft, pained, and unflinching. "Because you spent 3 years saving someone who never saw you," he said. "It's time someone did." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because, for the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't grief. It was small, fragile, and dangerous. Hope. And somehow, it felt more terrifying than love itself. The morning came softly, the kind that made everything look gentler than it really was. Light slipped through the curtains, falling over the small apartment like a blessing I couldn't accept. I blinked awake, unsure if I'd dreamed last night's conversation. Jisoo's words still echoed in my head, fragile and impossible. "I'm the heir to the Kong Empire." I had laughed, actually laughed, until he'd looked at me with eyes too serious for a joke. Now, with the quiet hum of the city outside, I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to make sense of it. The same Jisoo who once sold his guitar so we could pay rent. The same Jisoo who got scolded by our landlady for burning rice. The same Jisoo who once told me, "Rich people don't have fun, Heron. You and I do." No, there was no way. I rubbed my face and stood, glancing toward his futon, neatly folded as always. But the air was different. There was a stillness to it, a kind of weight that made my chest ache. "Morning." Jisoo's voice came from the kitchen. I turned. He was standing there with a cup of coffee, dressed in a charcoal suit I'd never seen before. The kind that fit perfectly, that spoke money before he ever opened his mouth. The scent of roasted beans hung in the air, sharp and expensive. "You look," I trailed off. He smiled faintly. "Different. Like someone I don't know." Jisoo didn't deny it. He just placed the mug down and said quietly, "Drink something before we go." "Go." He hesitated. "You'll see." Before I could ask, there was a knock, light but firm. Jisoo crossed the room, opened the door, and bowed his head slightly. A man in a black suit stood there. Behind him, on the street, a glossy black sedan idled, the Kong Group insignia glinting beneath the morning sun. "Your car is ready, young master," the man said. I froze. "Young master." My throat went dry. The driver glanced at me and gave a polite bow. "And this must be Mr. Heron. The chairman instructed me to bring you both." Jisoo turned back to me. "Let's go." "Wait," I managed. You weren't joking?" His eyes softened. "I told you the truth, Heron." I couldn't move. For a second, the world tilted, like gravity forgot where it was supposed to pull me. When I finally stepped outside, the car door opened before I could reach for it. The driver's hand rested over his heart in a respectful bow, something I'd only ever seen on television. I climbed in slowly, trying to breathe. The leather seat swallowed me whole. Jisoo sat beside me, silent, his gaze fixed out the window as the car began to move. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted you to know me before my name." "That's not fair," I said softly. "You lied to me." He looked at me then, really looked. "Would you have ever let me stay if you knew who I was?" I didn't answer. Because he was right. I wouldn't have. The car rolled to a stop 20 minutes later, pulling up before the Seoul Central Courthouse. My heart stuttered. "Why are we here?" He didn't look at me when he said, "To make sure no one can hurt you again." I blinked. "What are you?" "Marry me." The words hit harder than I expected. He said it so casually, like it wasn't the most impossible thing in the world. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "I'm completely serious." "Jisoo," I said, my chest tightening. "This isn't a drama. You can't just wake up one day and decide." "Heron," he interrupted, voice low, steady, too calm. "You said Daewon's family threatened you. If we're married, they can't touch you. Not legally. Not socially." I swallowed hard. "You think marriage fixes everything?" "No," he said. "But it gives me the right to protect you." The quiet conviction in his tone left me speechless. I didn't remember agreeing. 1 minute, I was staring at him, trying to find the lie in his eyes. The next, we were inside the courthouse, papers spread before us. My hands shook as I held the pen. The clerk's bored voice felt miles away. When I signed my name beside his, the sound of ink scratching the page felt heavier than thunder. And just like that, it was done. No flowers. No witnesses. No love story. Just 2 signatures and silence. "Congratulations," the clerk mumbled, stamping the document. I stared at the paper for a long time, unable to move. The Kong mansion, no, estate, was nothing like I'd imagined. Marble halls, polished floors, chandeliers that glowed like stars. Servants bowed when we entered, whispering, "Welcome home, young master." Home. The word didn't belong to Jasur, or to me. I walked behind him like a shadow, every step too loud, too awkward. A maid led me to a guest room bigger than our entire apartment. The bed looked like a cloud. The wardrobe was already filled with clothes my size. "How did they?" I began. "They've known about you," Jasur said from the doorway. "I told them you were important." I stared at him. "Important?" "Yes." His gaze softened. "More than you know." I turned away. "Stop saying things like that." He stepped closer. "Why?" "Because it's not true." My voice cracked. "You don't have to act like this. You don't owe me anything, Jasur." "I know," he said simply. "That's why I want to." I didn't know what to say. The walls felt too white, the air too heavy. He didn't push me. Just gave a small nod and started to leave. But before he reached the door, I found myself blurting, "Why me?" He paused. "Out of everyone you could have chosen, why me?" For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he turned, eyes unreadable. "Because you never looked at me like I was someone else," he said softly. "And I've wanted to return that kindness for a long time." Something in my chest cracked. He smiled faintly, the kind that didn't hide his sadness. "Rest, Heron. You're safe now." He left quietly after that. But I didn't sleep. I lay awake long after midnight, listening to the rain tapping against the window. Safe. The word didn't feel real. How could it, when I didn't even know who I was anymore? Yet somewhere in the silence of that vast room, I thought of his voice, low, calm, steady, saying you're worth protecting. And for the first time in a long while, I wanted to believe him. It had been 4 days since we signed those papers at the courthouse. For days since I woke up every morning wondering if I'd imagined it all. Every corner of the Kong mansion felt like it didn't belong to me. Polished marble floors that echoed too much, servants who bowed too deeply, meals that looked like art instead of food. Sometimes I caught them whispering when they thought I wasn't listening. "He doesn't look like someone from our world," they said. And they were right. Jasur didn't push me. He never did. He woke before sunrise, disappeared to his office, came home late, and always knocked before entering my room. Even though technically, it was ours. When he looked at me, there was something quiet in his eyes, guilt maybe. Or patience. But even patience couldn't drown the noise in my head. I needed air. I needed something familiar. So that afternoon, I slipped out, no guards, no driver, just the same faded hoodie and mask I used to wear to the cafe I once worked in. The cafe hadn't changed. The bell above the door still chimed, and the barista still smiled when she saw me. For a few minutes, I forgot everything, the accident, the hospital, the mansion, the papers that said I belonged to someone I didn't understand. Until I heard that voice. "Well, look who it is." I froze, the cup trembling in my hand. Day One Mom stood by the doorway, her pearls gleaming like accusation. Beside her was Day One himself, thinner than before, but still carrying that cruel, perfect smirk. "Heron," he said smoothly, "you look well. I heard you found yourself a new place to stay." People began to glance our way. Whispers started. Day One's mother's voice was sharp. "How dare you show your face in public after everything you've done?" I turned slowly. "What do you mean?" "You were in that car, weren't you?" she snapped. "My son nearly died because of you. And now you're out here, pretending to be innocent." "That's not what happened," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Oh, don't play victim," Day One scoffed. "You were desperate for attention. You never could stand being ignored, could you?" A bitter laugh left him. "Tell me, Heron, are you sleeping your way up now? Is that how you got yourself this time?" The cafe had gone silent. People were recording on their phones. My throat closed up. I didn't. Before I could finish, a calm voice sliced through the tension. "Careful with your words." I turned, and there he was, Jasur, standing a few steps away, calm in the middle of the chaos. For a moment, I thought I was imagining him. Day One's mother let out a dry laugh when she saw him. "Oh, look who's here," she said with that same mocking tone I'd heard 100 times before. "The stray who follows Heron around. Shouldn't you be somewhere working for pocket change?" Day One smirked. "Still trying to act like a savior, huh? You are always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Their words stung, but Jasur didn't move, didn't even blink. He just kept walking until he was standing right in front of them. "You've said enough," he said quietly. "You talk about responsibility, But your son drove drunk and almost killed the person who took care of him for 3 years. Daewon's mother scoffed. Watch your tone, boy. You have no idea who you're talking to. Yes, I do. Daewon's eyes widened. What are you doing here? Protecting my husband, Jisoo said evenly. The words landed like thunder. Daewon Mom blinked. You're what? You heard me, Jisoo replied, gaze cold. Haran is my husband, which means anyone who insults him insults me. The cafe was stunned into silence. I could barely breathe. Daewon laughed bitterly. You're joking. You? Married to him? Jisoo's lips curved faintly. Do I look like I joke? He pulled a sleek folder from his briefcase and laid it on the counter. Since you're so fond of truth, let's start there. He flipped it open. Inside were printed photos, clear, time-stamped, showing Daewon at a nightclub the night of the crash, a bottle in one hand, car keys in the other. The next photo showed him behind the wheel, laughing, a friend trying to take the keys away. You were drunk, Jisoo said quietly. You caused that crash, not Haran. Color drained from Daewon's face. His mother reached for the papers, but Jisoo's voice turned colder. I could have buried this quietly, but since you came here to destroy what's left of his name, I thought the truth deserved to breathe. Mrs. Daewon's jaw trembled. Who are you? Kong Jisoo, he replied simply. Heir of Kong Group. The silence that followed was deafening. Reporters outside began to whisper furiously. Cameras clicked. Someone gasped. Daewon stumbled back a step, eyes wide with realization. Jisoo turned to me, voice softening slightly. Let's go home. I followed, numb, heart pounding in my chest. He took my wrist gently and guided me to the car. My heart was beating too fast to think. Behind us, the Daewons were shouting, calling lawyers, cursing under their breath. But the sound faded the moment the car door shut. For the first time in years, I felt safe. Days later, every headline screamed about the Daewons. Drunk driving scandal rocks Daewon Group. Kong Heir defends victim husband, hidden marriage revealed. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone trembling in my hands. The comments were endless. Some called me lucky. Others called me a liar. But all I could think was, Jisoo did this. When he entered the room, I didn't look up. Was it you? I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. Yes. You destroyed their company, I whispered. Jisoo, they'll lose everything. He nodded once. They deserve it. My voice rose without meaning to. You didn't have to go that far. He met my eyes calmly. They tried to destroy you, Haran. I only made sure the world saw the truth. I stood shaking. Why? Why go this far for me? He took a breath, then stepped closer, slow, careful, like approaching something fragile. Because I've loved you for 5 years, he said quietly. The world tilted. He didn't look away. Since the first time I saw you, that night in the rain. You ran past my car, smiling like you'd won something, even though your clothes were torn and your shoes were falling apart. You looked happy. I didn't understand it. He smiled faintly, eyes glimmering with old memory. I wanted to know why. Why you could still smile when the world gave you nothing. So I followed you. I found out where you worked. I lied about who I was. I just wanted to know you. I wanted to be the reason you smiled again. His words hit harder than any confession could. I had been loved all along, and I hadn't even noticed. The tears came quietly this time. Not from pain, but from the fragile joy I didn't dare believe in before. I buried my face in his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a temporary comfort or a convenient escape. This was home. Months passed before the world truly calmed down. The Day family business collapsed under the weight of their lies, while Kong Group thrived with Jisoo's quiet leadership. I returned to work, started painting again, even laughed more easily. And one morning, Jisoo woke me with a whisper against my ear. Let's get married properly this time. I turned, half asleep. We already are. He smiled, brushing my hair away from my face. That was survival. This one's forever. The wedding wasn't extravagant. Just soft music, white roses, and sunlight spilling through the Kong estate garden. My suit wasn't new, but Jisoo said I looked perfect. He stood opposite me, his expression a mix of awe and tenderness that made my knees weak. When the officiant said, "You may exchange vows," Jisoo didn't even look at the paper. He said, voice steady, "I promise to protect the heart that once believed it didn't deserve love. I promise to hold you on the quiet days, and when storms return. You were my light when I was lost. You are my peace now." My hands shook when I slipped the ring onto his finger. "You found me when I was invisible. You taught me that love doesn't have to hurt. So I'll stay, Not because I owe you, but because I finally want to. The guests blurred away as he leaned forward, pressing his lips to mine. It wasn't the kind of kiss that burned. It was the kind that healed. The sky above was clear. No rain, no thunder, only sunlight and the sound of our hearts finding rhythm together. For once, I didn't look back. Because this time, I wasn't someone's replacement. I wasn't a stand-in or a mistake. I was Heir, loved, chosen, and finally free. And when Jasur whispered against my ear, "Welcome home," I realized the rain had truly stopped. The sea always sounded different in the morning. Gentler, maybe. Like it remembered how much we'd been through, and decided to be kind for once. I sat on the balcony of the villa, knees drawn up, a cup of coffee in my hands. The horizon stretched endlessly, pinks and golds melting into the soft blue waves. The air smelled like salt and sunlight. Behind me, I heard the sliding door open. Bare footsteps, light against the wood. Then a sleepy voice murmured, "You're awake already?" Jasur's arms slipped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. His hair was a mess, his voice low and warm. "You snore," I said, half laughing, sipping my coffee. He chuckled against my skin. "I do not." "You do. Like a lazy bear." "I'm the heir of a billion-dollar empire," he said in mock offense, "not a bear." I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch the small, drowsy smile on his face. "A very sleepy heir, then." He hummed, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "You talk too much in the morning." We stayed like that for a while, the quiet broken only by the waves and the occasional seagull cry. It still felt strange sometimes, this peace. No hospital lights, no cold rooms filled with lies. Just this, sunlight, laughter, and the steady rhythm of two hearts finally resting. After a moment, he spoke softly. "You know, my mother called this morning." "Oh, she wants to host a dinner next week. Officially introduce you as part of the family." My heart skipped a little. "Part of the family?" He nodded. "They already see you that way. But my mother wants the whole board to see it too." The thought made me nervous, but Jasur's hand squeezed mine. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, Heir. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." I smiled faintly. "You make it sound so easy." "It is," he said. "When you're with the right person." He tilted my chin, and before I could reply, he kissed me. Slow, unhurried, like time had stopped. The kind of kiss that made everything else blur away. When we finally pulled apart, I could feel the warmth of his breath against my skin. "You know," he said, "you still haven't told me what you want to do now that you're done with everything." I looked out at the ocean. "Maybe, open a small art studio. Somewhere quiet. Paint for myself again." His eyes softened. "Then I'll build it for you." I laughed. "You can't just build me a studio, Jasur. Watch me." He said it with that infuriating mix of confidence and tenderness that always made me give in. And in that moment, I realized, this was what love was supposed to feel like. Not grand gestures or painful sacrifices. Just someone who stayed, who listened, who built a life beside you instead of around you. The wind picked up, brushing through my hair. I turned back toward the sea, the waves glittering under the rising sun. Jasur wrapped his arms tighter around me and whispered, "See, the rain really did stop." I smiled. "Yeah," I said softly. And for the first time in years, the sun rose, and this time, it rose for me.